The internet landscape has undergone a profound transformation over the past few decades, with various influencers leaving an undeniable mark on the digital sphere. Among these pioneers is Joe Rogan.
So have you ever done DMT?
Through his podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, Rogan has redefined the medium of long-form conversations and impacted how people consume and engage with content online. Born on August 11th, 1967 in Newark, New Jersey, Rogan gained some recognition as a stand-up comedian in the late 1980s. His sharp wit and fearless approach to comedy set the stage for his later ventures. Rogan transitioned to television as the host of the popular game show Fear Factor, where contestants faced extreme challenges for cash prizes. He also appeared on the sitcom Hardball, which followed players on a fictional MLB team during the 1994 player strike. It's genuinely one of the worst TV shows I think I've ever seen.
Frank, despite the fact you make $6 million a year, you're on strike for more money. You ever think, gee, maybe I should just forget about the money and go out and play for the sheer love of the game? What are you, stupid?
And he also acted on sitcoms like NewsRadio in the late 1990s. Concurrently, he honed his skills as a color commentator for the UFC from 97 to 2016. He brought his unique blend of humor and insight into mixed martial arts. He was well known, but he wasn't a household name just yet. That was until the Joe Rogan Experience emerged as a podcast in December 2009. Initially, this was just a platform for Rogan to share his thoughts and engage in candid conversations with friends and fellow comedians. Over time, the podcast evolved into a diverse platform featuring interviews with various guests like scientists, artists, athletes, and political figures. Rogan's unique approach to unfiltered, long-form conversations provided a very refreshing alternative to traditional media, setting the stage for a revolution in online content consumption. Before this, the closest thing we had to just unbridled conversation were the presidential debates. And now, we have 3 hours of Joe Rogan and someone else just talking to one another. His ability to break free from conventional interview formats set Joe Rogan apart and creates this environment where guests feel comfortable expressing their views openly. The lack of time constraints allows for in-depth discussions, fostering genuine and authentic conversations that resonate with a global audience. The departure from scripted and edited content, taking 3 hours and making it 3 minutes, has contributed to a shift in audience expectations, with many seeking authenticity and unfiltered dialogue in the content that they consume. Rogan's unique hosting style, characterized by his genuine curiosity and willingness to explore controversial topics, has resonated with audiences seeking authenticity in media consumption. Because these conversations are unscripted, it fosters this sense of relatability. It's like you're there with them, hearing them talk. It's like you're part of the conversation. You're not just listening to an interview, you're listening to someone that you think you know. On top of that too, Joe Rogan just lets his guests speak. He doesn't try to talk over them. There are a lot of interviewers that like to just talk over their guests, and Joe Rogan doesn't do that. He lets his guests speak and doesn't try to talk over them, instead just letting them speak. His strategic use of YouTube as a distribution platform is also central to Rogan's influence. By posting full-length video versions of his podcast to YouTube, Rogan tapped into the medium's visual nature, allowing viewers to listen and watch the engaging conversations as they happen. This approach expanded the reach of JRE beyond traditional podcast platforms, attracting a massive online following and introducing the podcasting format to a visually oriented audience. You didn't have to watch them. You could just listen to them. But having something there for you to actually see and relate to really helps. Before Joe Rogan, podcasts did exist, but they weren't as widely popular or mainstream as they are today. The podcasting landscape as we know it underwent a very notable transformation when Joe Rogan came onto the scene. Prior to JRE, podcasts were often seen as catering to niche audiences. Shows covered specific interests, industries, or hobbies, but the medium had yet to achieve widespread appeal. I remember back in 2015, a podcast that I really loved was called Kaiju Cast, and it was all about Godzilla. They would break down a movie and just spend hours and hours talking about it. But again, that's a very niche thing. Many people were unfamiliar with the concept of podcasts, and the medium was not as well known or easily accessible as it is today. Discoverability was a challenge, and podcasts struggled to reach a broad audience. As a result of Joe Rogan taking the podcast medium into the mainstream, the podcasting landscape saw a massive shift. Nowadays, everyone has a podcast, myself included. Joe Rogan's show became a reference point in popular culture, and discussions on his podcast often influence public opinion. When you think of podcasts, you think of Joe Rogan. The medium moved more towards platform exclusivity deals. Joe Rogan signed an exclusive licensing agreement with Spotify, leading other podcasters and platforms to explore similar agreements. Rogan's influence goes beyond the podcast format, seeping into the broader cultural fabric of the internet. Memes and catchphrases from JRE have become cultural touchstones, further amplifying Rogan's impact. Whether it's the Joe Rogan Experience logo,
hello, freak bitches,
or humorous snippets from the podcast.
Like all of a sudden I'd be trying to prove that I'm not crazy when I knew I wasn't crazy.
Right. Every single time that Joe Rogan has said it's entirely possible,
it's entirely possible
have all become meme material since the podcast's inception. That being said, though, Joe Rogan's ascent to digital stardom has not been without its fair share of criticism and controversy. As the Joe Rogan Experience gained prominence, it inevitably became a subject of scrutiny, with critics pointing to various aspects of the podcast that sparked debate and raised concerns. One significant point of contention revolved around the open and unfiltered nature of the conversations on JRE. While Rogan's approach to allowing guests to express their views without heavy moderation has been praised for its authenticity, some have drawn criticism for occasionally providing a platform to controversial figures and fringe ideas. This lack of editorial control has been criticized by some as inadvertently amplifying misinformation or contributing to the spread of ideas that could be harmful. The podcast's wide-ranging topics, from politics and science to culture and spirituality, have sometimes led to accusations of inconsistency and a lack of depth in fact-checking. Critics contend that this approach may blur the line between genuine exploration of ideas, the propagation of unfounded claims, or just spreading misinformation. In response to these concerns, Rogan has acknowledged the need for a more vigilant approach and is committed to addressing misinformation on the platform. But I gotta say, that's kind of just what you're gonna get when you have such a wide range of guests on the show. He's not in control of what they say. He's not going to censor it, and if anything, that's what makes the show so interesting. But it's those guests that have fueled discussions about the responsibility that comes with the influential platform that he commands. Figures like Alex Jones, Charles Murray, and even Amy Schumer have appeared on the podcast. And these episodes have sparked public outcry and led to calls for more careful vetting of guests. Rogan, in turn, has defended his commitment to free speech and open dialogue when emphasizing the importance of allowing diverse perspectives, even if they're controversial or unpopular. Whether or not you like Joe Rogan, or you hate him, or you're somewhere in the middle, you have to admit that he has forever changed the internet as we know it. He has managed to reshape the podcasting landscape. He influenced content creation, consumption patterns, and even the monetization of online platforms. His success is not just about the podcast. Rather, it symbolizes a broader cultural shift towards authenticity, accessibility, and unfiltered discourse in the digital realm. As the internet continues to evolve, Joe Rogan's legacy will undoubtedly be remembered as a pivotal force that changed the internet forever.